The 2003-2004 Detroit Pistons are under a ton of pressure. The Pistons started this season poorly. They have a new old coach and a new young draft pick, and both are grumpy despite what the totally natural chemistry of this photo might suggest. But now Detroit is winning enough that GM Joe Dumars feels like he's got to go for it, and his target is capricious big man Rasheed Wallace. But she just got traded to the Atlanta Hawks, so there goes that opportunity, and the trade deadline is approaching fast, unless maybe not? Is Rasheed Wallace really going to get traded twice in the same month? Is he even worth the trouble? Yes and yes. The Pistons' trade for Rasheed Wallace was a championship-sized big deal. Hey, subscribe to Secret Base on Patreon. For a few bucks a month, you get all kinds of exclusive and early access stuff, and you'd get to watch a video like this with 0 ads, including this one. This is kind of an ad. Anyway, in the 03-04 season, Pistons GM Joe Dumars put himself in a bit of a predicament. By far, the hardest part of this script was choosing when to use the 2 phones photo. This spot feels right. Anyway, for a couple years, the Pistons had been very good, but not great. Dumars built a solid core that played terrific defense, and Detroit recorded consecutive 50-win seasons in 02 and 03. But come playoff time, stronger Eastern Conference teams prevailed. In the summer of 2003, Dumars made 2 huge changes. One calculated, the other kind of happenstance. The first was firing head coach Rick Carlisle. Carlisle had only coached 2 seasons in Detroit, and they represented the best basketball the Pistons had played in a decade, but out he went. Fans and media were dismayed by the firing, but if there was one thing to critique about Carlisle's tenure, it was his reluctance to mobilize youth. Behind their core, Detroit had a couple rookies who hadn't gotten to show off their promise until it was too late. And they were about to add another. That's the second big change. Thanks to a past trade and some surprise lottery luck, the Pistons owned the number 2 pick in the loaded 2003 draft. They couldn't snag LeBron James, but they could claim literally anyone else from one of the most promising rookie classes ever assembled. A rare, lucky luxury for a winning team. With a surprise open coaching seat and a surprise primo draft pick in hand, Dumars grabbed both his phones and dialed up more surprises. First, Dumars hired Larry Brown, an accomplished, if ornery, coaching legend who, even more than Carlisle, was known for burying young players. That alone is not surprising. The surprising part was when Dumars then used his number 2 pick not as trade bait for a star, not as an opportunity to add a relatively known quantity at a position of need, but to pick up Darko Milicic, the youngest player in the draft, a raw and mysterious teenage center from overseas. Then Dumars traded away a couple of savvy role-player veterans that Brown might have preferred. It just didn't quite add up on paper. And by midwinter, it wasn't quite adding up on the court. Brown hardly used the hotshot new kid, Milicic. He and his staff had problems with players up and down the rotation, youngsters and vets alike. And the 03-04 Pistons weren't winning at the same clip as prior years. They did not look equipped to achieve their goal of winning the East, especially with new rivals entering contention. By January, Larry Brown was reacting the way Larry Brown notoriously reacted to things. Fix my roster. Make a trade. Here, even earlier than expected, was the so-called philosophical contradiction everyone saw coming. Brown was thinking short-term, win-win-win, now. Dumars said no, don't jump off the bandwagon, you must continue to believe. The GM felt compelled to balance the present with the future. Dumars had his eye on the summer of 04. When second-year Turkish big man Mehmet Okur would become a restricted free agent. Okur had been a great second-round pick for the Pistons, and Dumars wanted to get Detroit further below the salary cap so they could match offer sheets and re-sign the promising Okur. In any event, the GM did not make a hasty move to get his coach some veteran help. He waited and watched, and here's what he saw. In December and January, the Pistons rang up a 13-game win streak, tying a franchise record set by the 1990 champions. The wins were a nice validation of Dumars' plea to stay on the bandwagon. But the streak also put Dumars in a bind as the NBA's mid-February trade deadline approached. Once you've used the photo twice, you got to go in for a third time. That's it, I promise. Dumars had to decide. Should he keep the focus on cutting salary to help future rosters contend for a title, or shift focus to adding talent so the current roster could maximize its chances at winning the 2004 title? The former path was straightforward. Dumars could trade away some backups for basically nothing to open up more cap space, then he would almost certainly be able to re-sign Okur in the offseason. But that would not improve Coach Brown's rotation. So if and when the Pistons flamed out in the 2004 playoffs, Brown would absolutely whine, and people would absolutely blame Dumars, who had fired the prior coach and wasted an exceptional draft opportunity. Which, yeah, drafting Darko was already looking like a huge mistake. Okay, so what about making a win-now trade? After trading away Clifford Robinson, Detroit's foremost position of need remained at power forward. Ben Wallace was a magisterial defensive center, but had almost nothing to offer on offense. And Detroit didn't roster a true four built to complement Big Ben. They were stuck either playing Okur out of position or leaning on 35-year-old Eldon Campbell. Especially in a playoff race that would bring Detroit up against star power forwards like Jermaine O'Neal and Kenyon Martin, this was a big flaw. Dumars checked the market for low-stakes options. Chicago's Marcus Fizer? Probably not good enough, and Dumars said any rumored deals with the Bulls were bogus. The Sixers tried to offer up Glenn Robinson, who was a little beat up but still quite a good scorer, but Dumars didn't want Big Dog's salary. Other fours supposedly on the trade block didn't quite fit on the court or on the payroll. Donyell Marshall, Juwan Howard, Malik Rose, it was slim pickings. With one exception, Rasheed Wallace. Sheed had worn out his welcome with the Portland Trailblazers, which we'll talk about, but the big guy had a lot going for him. 6'11", natural power forward in his prime, scoring ability inside and out, defense strong enough to fit in Detroit's style of play. Fellow Tar Heel Larry Brown was a big fan. That was the guy he wanted. Wallace also had an expiring contract, so while Dumars had shut down the notion of trading for Wallace earlier in the season, acquiring Sheed increasingly seemed like the best way to improve immediately without squeezing the salary cap later. It was kind of a shit. A week and a half before the trade deadline, the lottery-bound Atlanta Hawks dumped a bunch of contracts on the Blazers in exchange for Sheed. Bad news for the Pistons. But wait, good news? The Hawks didn't really want him. It was a purely cynical salary dump, and by the time Wallace had played literally one game, Atlanta was willing to trade him once more. But wait, bad news again. Sheed was telling friends he wanted to play for the New York Knicks, and his agent outright confirmed it. And the Knicks liked him back. Detroit had competition. So here, with the Pistons slumping again and the trade deadline approaching fast, was a new version of the Joe Dumars conundrum. Dumars had basically revealed that Detroit intended to make a move, but hadn't found a sensible short/long-term fit outside of Rasheed Wallace. Sheed was, oddly enough, available again, but the lay of the land looked a bit different from the prior week. Wallace's pros were clear, but the list of cons had gotten longer. The pre-existing con was a vague cloud of character issues from Portland. A heap of technical fouls, fines, plus some off-court stuff, albeit nothing like the grimmest headlines generated by some of his teammates on the so-called Jailblazers. But there was still the potential for bad PR in any Sheed trade. Then you could add in the new cons. The dude very clearly wanted to be a Knick. So this made trading with the Hawks to get Sheed a dicey proposition. Atlanta wasn't desperate to resolve a headache like the Blazers were. The Hawks were just holding Sheed hostage to see if they could make good teams bid against each other for a trade. Through this lens, Wallace's expiring contract had a downside. If he was just going to go to New York come summertime, was it really worth ponying up players and picks to outbid other teams, all for a guy who was just going to leave town in a couple months? Joe Dumars, sorry, I lied, weighed his options, considered the pros and cons, and said, yes, it is worth it. Here is the full trade, consummated with help from the Boston Celtics on February 19th, 2004, just 10 days after the Hawks acquired Wallace. The Pistons got Rasheed Wallace from the Hawks and point guard Mike James from the Celtics. The Pistons sent bench players to each of those teams, thus clearing some salary, and they also sent each of those teams a future first-round pick. All parts of this warrant unpacking. The top-line outcome here is straightforward. This was a win-now move. Trade skeptics said, well, Detroit better win the title or this is going to look bad. Pistons rivals felt like Detroit had just been handed a massive boost to those title odds. Indeed, Rasheed Wallace fit exactly as one would hope alongside the unrelated Ben Wallace, did not cause trouble, played splendidly on both ends, and helped the Detroit Pistons win the 2004 NBA championship. Detroit vanquished their old rival in the Nets, took down the upstart Pacers to break through to the NBA Finals, and then pulled off a shocking takedown of the stacked LA Lakers to win it all. Throughout that run, Sheed was an X factor. Plenty productive on the court and a critical locker room voice / vibes guy / face of the franchise. And Mike James pitched in too. The answer to, is it worth it to trade real assets for a guy who's only under contract for 3 months, is a resounding yes if you're going to win the title. But winning the title did change things. Remember, Joe Dumars knowingly traded for a guy who wanted to join the Knicks. That was acceptable because it would let Detroit re-sign Mehmet Okur. But first of all, Okur was displeased with the way Sheed's arrival affected his role. And most of all, the short-term payoff of the Sheed acquisition was so great that all involved were like, forget it, let's stay together. Signing Sheed meant abandoning what was once Joe Dumars' offseason priority. Detroit could not match Utah's offer sheet for Okur. Wallace played 5 more very good years on very good Detroit teams that didn't win another title. Okur also had a very good next 5 years on very good Jazz teams that also did not win a title. Statistically, they were pretty close, and Okur was much cheaper and younger. None of this is to say Joe Dumars spent a single moment regretting that shift in priorities. He was too distracted by the gleam of his 2004 championship ring. I'm just saying the immediate success of the trade did have ripple effects on the future of the Pistons. And this applies to the other teams too. Yes, Boston and Atlanta for sure helped Detroit win the 2004 title, but don't forget they also each received a 2004 first-round pick from Detroit. Atlanta got to pick 17th, and Josh Smith's whole deal is too funky to summarize right now, but that's a valuable draft pick and a valuable player, at least for a time. And for facilitating the salary balance of the Sheed trade, Boston received Detroit's 25th pick in 2004, and hey, they too got a key player who would help them win a title one day. Boston and Atlanta each got something out of the exchange. It was not a total robbery. Really, the only pure loser here is the Knicks, who didn't feel pressure to pony up for Wallace mid-season since they thought they could sign him in free agency, only for summertime Sheed to change his mind because things went so great in Detroit. Oopsie daisy. Everyone else got something, and the Pistons clearly got the most the fastest. Rasheed Wallace had a legendary individual run in Detroit and helped them achieve a legendary team run the moment he arrived. All of this happened because Joe Dumars faced a conundrum of his own making, struggling to balance the near-term and long-term promise of a talented roster playing for an impatient coach. Dumars addressed his problem with a win-now trade for Rasheed Wallace, and it ended up being the perfect solution. The 2004 Pistons won now. That trade was a big, big deal. Hey, it's the end card. Like I said, you should subscribe to Secret Base on Patreon, but it's okay if you don't, because we got some more stuff on YouTube. And in fact, we got some great Rasheed Wallace stuff on YouTube.